This is just amazing, and thank you everybody for showing up and marking this moment. I was just inside this detention center. You know, the word detention is a sanitized bureaucratic word. It's a jail, it's a prison, people are locked up inside. The immigrant that I met with is locked up in there. He's treated like a common criminal, like somebody who's been convicted of murder. What's his crime? He's not a U.S. citizen. You know, the other day, and I want to say, I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. My dad fled the Nazis from Germany. And my grandfather, believe it or not, was a decorated flyer in the German Air Force in World War I. He was a decorated flyer, shot down over France, all kinds of crazy stories, but he was a war hero. How many years later, he was considered, what was the word? Untermenschen, subhuman. So you can see how fast things change. And what we're witnessing in this country right now is a moment. And this is a moment that we will look back on 10, 20, 30 years from now and ask ourselves, what did I do? Your grandparents, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will ask you, what did you do? What did you do in the face of the tyranny of Donald Trump? What did you do? All of you standing here today have an answer. You know, Sunday I was watching the talk shows, and Stephen Miller, who is the so-called immigration czar, the white nationalist immigration czar in the White House, was on television. And he exclaimed that he was appalled that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would use the term concentration camp, to describe where these children, where these people are being held without soap. And I'll tell you what, and I tweeted this out almost immediately, you know what appalls me? Is the occupant in the White House that cages children, the occupant in the White House that separates children last year with no fundamental plan to reunite these kids. And that was on purpose, don't kid yourselves. Because they used the system, when they separated these babies from their mothers, they used the system for unaccompanied minors that had been in place. And that system, use your logic, does not involve reuniting because they are unaccompanied. This was criminal what they did. In most states, that's felony kidnapping. The occupant of the White House is guilty of crimes. And those that support him, and those that enable him, and those in Congress that apologize for him, and those in the streets and in the cities that don't say anything are just as complicit. And you know, this isn't ending. We fight this battle every day. Every day. In addition to what I do downtown, I'm a partner at a law firm called Ulmer Byrne. I'm also counsel to a group called DHS Watch, which is a project of a group called America's Voice, which is the voice of the immigration movement. And just yesterday, with all of these other horrible policies emanating from the White House, they did something very tricky. They took this concept of expedited removal. I'm going to give you a little law lesson here. Okay, I will test you afterward. Expedited removal is in the law, and it basically says that if a low-level bureaucrat called an immigration officer decides that you're coming in the country through fraud, or you don't have a proper visa, they can throw you out of the country with no hearing. Nothing. Out. It's been going on since the law changed in 1997. What they did yesterday, that law was applied within 100 miles of the border. People who had recently crossed the border. As bad enough as it is, it was applied to recent border crossers. The exception, of course, are people applying for asylum. What did they do yesterday, quietly? They expanded expedited removal to the entire country as of today. What does that mean? If they encounter an undocumented immigrant, and that undocumented immigrant cannot prove that she or he or they have been in this country for more than 2 years, they are expedited out of the United States. They can ask for asylum maybe, but there's a 1-year bar if you've been here for longer than a year. So that's not going to be a great alternative. That's how it affects undocumented immigrants. But what about an American citizen who happens to have brown skin and can't readily prove that he or she or they are a citizen? Yes, ICE has to try and verify, but we know about ICE's verification systems, and we know the kind of negligence and corruption that goes into what happens in those offices. Don't kid yourself. Everybody in this group, everybody you meet, can be exposed to expedited removal used in the wrong hands. This is an unprecedented example, expansion of power, and I'm telling you, this is by design. Why do I know that? You all remember John Kelly, the great grown-up in the room when he was chief of staff, who did nothing to temper the occupant in the White House? John Kelly, when he first became Secretary of Homeland Security in February of 2017, issued 2 memos, and one of the memos said that, you know, we don't like expedited removal just being at the border, and one day we're going to expand it. It basically says that. Why didn't they do it right away? Well, I'll tell you why they didn't do it right away. Because when Trump got into office, he knew, Stephen Miller knew, that there were plenty of people in this country who were under final orders of deportation, of removal. Now, does that mean that they deserve to be removed? No. If you work within the system, you know that many of those people got those orders without due process. That's a whole nother speech. They started to clear those people out of the country. Why? Because they knew all they had to do was call them into ICE headquarters. These were the law-abiding citizens. They would comply. Easy mark, easy low-hanging fruit, and get them out of here. And if you go over to Brooklyn Heights to the ICE office any day of the week, you'll see mothers with ankle bracelets on, waiting to be removed. Now, I suspect that as they plan for a second term, chas v'shalom, that's translated to mean God forbid. I suspect that what they're going to do is use expedited removal to increase the mass deportation within the United States. Every day, there's another Trump atrocity occurring. And every day, we have the obligation to stand up. And let me tell you one other thing, because I've been talking too long, but this is important. The occupant of the White House, in case you didn't know this, is a big con artist. And let me give you an example as to why he's a con artist and why he's laughing at his own base of supporters. Because as he walks around from 2015, when he first called Mexicans rapists and so on, same kind of language used by Adolf Hitler. When he started his campaign by disparaging, by dehumanizing Mexicans and other Latinos, at the same time, in his golf clubs, in his wineries, at Mar-a-Lago, he was exploiting undocumented labor. This is not just me saying so. The Washington Post has chronicled this very carefully. The New York Times has chronicled it. It just hasn't gotten the attention that it should get. But if you Google Trump undocumented workers, it'll all come up. We're talking about not just a few people who didn't have documents who worked there. We're talking about Trump's organization getting these people false documents, Trump's organization stealing their wages, Trump's organization physically abusing at least one that we know of, Victorina Morales, Trump's organization playing a joke on the American people. This is a con, and it's our job over the next year and a half to make sure that the entire country knows about it. We've got to win the state of Ohio for the Democrat that's nominated. I don't care who it is. We have got to win the state of Ohio, and that means every one of you has got to get out and canvass, got to get